So I'm really excited to present this topic today in Singapore, and it's really an honor to be in person at Hack in the Box again. So really like it. Last time was in Amsterdam. I'm really happy to enjoy the conference. Who am I? So I'm Thomas. You can see a picture of me here. I'm focusing on embedded IoT security related technologies, so hacking IoT stuff, reverse engineering embedded devices, and I was speaker on various conferences like Hack in the Box, of course, and ITSecX, which is a local conference in Austria. And I've also published several security advisories regarding embedded devices, regarding IoT devices, also regarding printers. And if you remember the keynote talk, all of the devices which you heard there, PLCs and so on, I like them because they are insecure. So the outline of my talk is just foundations. So baseline, so what you have to know about Internet of Things security stuff, and also digital twins, so a lot of stuff like that. OT infrastructure and typical OT security assessment. I'm trying to combine now digital twins, operating technology, and security vulnerability research all together in this talk, and that's a bit challenging. Of course, the construction of digital twins, a bit security testing. One thing, the security vulnerabilities are not published yet because the vendors take a bit more time to fix them, but those are really, really easy vulnerabilities, and if you're interested, you can find them too. That's not a problem. And of course, a short conclusion regarding all those topics. So what is OT? Some of you might know. It's operational technology, like IT, which is informational technology. And you have a lot of devices on a lot of levels in the OT environment that are RTUs, PLCs, HMIs, engineering stations, SCADA servers, historians, and so on. So a lot of devices. And some of those are IoT devices. You call them industrial Internet of Things if they are placed in such an operational technology network, of course. Can be IP cameras, printers, routers, and so on. You also have them in operating technology environments. But if those are industrial routers, sensors, actuators, industrial environments, or maybe cameras which are observing a process like melting metal or whatever it may be, then it's of course called industrial Internet of Things. So the border in between those two things is not really hard. And you have digital twins. And during this session, because there are a lot of types of digital twins, during this session, digital twins are meant to be real. It's like a copy from an operating system, from a real device, because all of those things are computers, of course, which is running like a real system. So you can start it, but you don't need the hardware. Sometimes digital twins are just simulations of processes. So that's the difference. So there are a lot of different definitions of digital twins. I also call them firmware digital twins because you're just copying the operating system of the device, the firmware. Started or modified, started, and then it runs like a real firmware. Of course, you have about some implications, but I will come to this later. So in the early days, OT was just field bus technology, a bit Modbus, a bit Profibus, a bit CAN bus systems, which were cables just lying around in the fab, and you connected those devices together and then just send out your messages via this bus technology. You had PLCs with one programming interface, a COM port, like you cables like this, you know, the DSOP, and a few kilobits of memory sometimes. So it was really a small computer, really basic. And supervision was implemented via analog technology. So maybe you know those big rooms where you had lamps, where you had some kind of networks, everything really analog, and the light was just blinking if the process was failing or whatever. So supervision was really done in an analog way. In early days, you had all those things, but nowadays, it gets more complicated. You have Ethernet all around your fab, which is sometimes doing supervision of whatever, power, memory, sensors, actuators, and so on. You have manageable Ethernet switches all around the infrastructure, so on all those levels, so from level 0 to level 4 and level 5, in the Purdue model of the OT system. And you have also, because it's not complicated enough, you have also to add routers, firewalls to connect the IT world with the OT, so that you can export data that you can access from the IT to the OT, which is sometimes not a good idea, but it's constantly done by a lot of companies. And you have a lot of peripheral devices, the IIoT or the IoT. So far so good. What are the differences between IT and OT? Also from a pen tester's perspective. You have a lot of network bandwidth, you have a lot of business related information, software time, and so on in IT. So that's the traditional IT system. If I, as a pen tester, walk into a company and do a penetration test, some of you might know, in IT systems, you can have a lot of fun. It's really a lot of fun to do penetration tests, and yeah, usually no processes, no physical processes are dependent on those IT systems. So if the server just reboots, then okay, some data is lost, but it reboots and it will work next time. If some clients will just be stuck, have denial of service because you are doing a scanning of a port scanning of the device, then yeah, it's okay. Just stuck and that's it. You can reboot it, no problem. In the OT world, you have not that much network traffic. You have a low bandwidth. You just need some signals to indicate whether a process is running, whether sensors or actuators are running, or just communicate some signals in between, or to the SCADA server, or from SCADA server to the historian, and so on. But it's not that much. You have also industrial related information. So it's not really like, okay, in the next few seconds, I want to trade whatever this stock. It's like the sensor or the actuator says 1 or 0. So the motors or the engine is running or is not running, or the pump is doing its work or not. And you have also hard real time. So if you are not getting the information of the current temperature, it may be too late in the next second. And other things, of course. So if a short system failure is proceeding, then maybe it's too late, because the process already turns down your whole factory, and you can spend the next 2 weeks or more just to build up the process again, to clean all the whatever it may be. So it can be manufacturing of I don't know, some parts for washing machines, or it can be a bottling company or whatever. You can spend a lot of time to bring it up again, and sometimes even months if it's a chemical factory, because then you have to clean a lot. And the thing is, upgrades are only coming during maintenance windows, and maintenance windows are not really often in OT systems. Sometimes once a year, sometimes just one time in 2 years or in 3 years or whatever, because the factor is really, really important. And for typical OT security assessments, you have to be careful. You have to log all your network traffic, what you are doing, because otherwise it may be, the OT, the guy who's doing the management of the whole OT network, is saying to you, okay, you have, broken that process, and now we have to pay a lot of money, few thousands of dollars or whatever. And if you can say, no, I have logged my network traffic and it's not my fault, then of course that's fine, because otherwise, you have to pay all the money if you have no good insurance. And, do not use automated security scanners for IT, because those security scanners may just break everything. So I had OT security assessments where I just did a port scan, of course, during a maintenance window, so it was not the big problem, but about 200 PLCs were just rebooting at that moment. That's bad if it's during the daily work, because then, it may break a lot. I have talked about the Purdue model, so you can see some kind of Purdue model in this figure. So that's also why I'm telling you about faking at level 1, because level 1 is this section here. So PLCs, RDUs, and whatever. And you can see enterprise IT infrastructure, which is the IT world, is connected here at level 4. So really high level after the whole OT environment, which you can see here. And usually it's also separated by a firewall. And all the stuff which is here below is the whole OT network infrastructure, which is composed by level 3, level 2, level 1, level 0. And sometimes there is some kind of level 3.5, which is the gateway to the IT. And you can see there are a lot of devices here: engineering station, historian, application station, and so on. And here you have also your engineering station where you can program the PLCs, which is going down here to level 1. So there are links in between, of course, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to connect those devices, and you wouldn't be able to program them and do supervision. And the problem is sometimes our customers just don't do this kind of separation between the levels on horizontal or on vertical or anyway. And then you have all those devices in one big network, which is sometimes a really big problem. One of our customers had just one problem with one of his switches, which were broadcasting all information, all packets through the whole switch, because we don't know. Maybe the switch table was flooded or not. We don't know. And then the whole OT network was stuck. Was just denial of service of the whole network. So it's not even a malicious attack. It was just failure. That's it. And for that cases, it's really wise to do this kind of separation between those levels. So how do we do OT security assessments? Pretty straightforward. So it's like in an IT system, but you have to be a bit carefully, because it's like heart surgery and not like knocking on all doors in an apartment house. And it's a bit different, but the steps are the same. So information gathering, then active testing, and afterwards reporting. So for information gathering, you can also use the blueprints. So reviews of the network blueprints. You can collect information about all the system, about the firmware, doing network sniffing, but you have to be careful. And for active testing, that you have to be really careful. I would suggest to either to do step-by-step tests. So just trying to access the web interfaces, then trying to access some ports, but not trying all in an automated way. And it's also possible to use Tenable OT. They have created some kind of special scanning system, so like Nessus, but just for OT systems. But in the end, if something fails, then denial of service, destroyed devices, power supply, and even home and life can be put at risk. So if there are issues also in OT scanning software like Tenable, if some issue arises, then you will have the problem as penetration tester. And your customer will have the problem that the process is just shut down. And can be a real problem. So a possible solution for all those problems, because you can see it can have a lot of implications, is to make a digital copy of the whole OT network. Of course, not of all 100% of the devices, but at least of, let's say, 70 or 60 or 80% of the devices. Because if you have a digital copy with digital twins, then you have the advantage that you can do a real pen test on the digital copy and not on the OT system of your customer. So if the device will be shut down or just will be crash, whatever, for whatever reason that you are doing on the network interface, then it's not a problem because it's the digital copy. It's not the real OT network. And such technique would be some kind of virtual pen testing. So there are also vendors in the OT environment which are using this as marketing buzzword, but I asked them, and it's not really virtual pen testing. It's just collecting firmware versions and collecting the CVEs which have been published of these firmware versions. And if you are using virtualization, so the digital twins, a digital copy of those devices, of those infrastructure, then it always has a certain gap. So you will have a gap between the digital twin and the physical device, because you cannot really copy all the IOs. So if you have some relays or if you have some signals going out and going in to the device, of course, it's digital. It's just a copy. It cannot simulate all stuff like this, but you can emulate the firmware, and that's the big advantage. And you can also access via this Ethernet or Wi-Fi interface to the digital copy, which is really great. And of course, it's really difficult to do a digital copy of all those devices. I mean, that's really a problem sometimes, but it still pays off if you're doing this, because then you have the digital twin of the device, and you don't have to break the whole OT network, and you don't have to pay a few K or more for just putting down the operation of your vendor's fab. So how is it possible to create some digital twin to construct all of this? So, of course, we have heard it today. You can extract the firmware, but you can also download the firmware from the internet or from the vendor's website. You have to analyze the firmware and prepare it for virtualization, because sometimes it's not working out of the box. And then you have to start the desired virtualization environment to create the digital twin. There are open source tools, and you have to run the digital twin. You can see a lot of tools here. There are more. There are also derivations of those tools, but all in all, maybe you know some of those logos. You have Emux or Amix, Medusa, G-Link, and Firmidine, where there's also a new version of this one, or an extended version, which is called Firm AE. I think it's from a Korean university. And you can see all of them, or most of them, are specialized to creating digital twins or doing rehosting, because it's always called in a different way, from Linux-based firmware. So if you look for emulation of some kind of real-time operating systems, of course, there are some tools out there, but they are not really easy to handle. And if you are not an expert, or if you don't have any expertise regarding this topic, then it's really hard to dig in there, and it's really hard to do emulation of real-time operating system. But all in all, those tools are some of those which you can use for creating digital twins. There's also a gap also in those tools, of course, as I have mentioned before. On the physical device, you have the chipset. You have vulnerabilities sometimes in implementations of drivers and so on. But you cannot always emulate all of those chips, and sometimes you will not find some vulnerabilities which may be present on the real device. You have IOs. Sometimes you cannot access to those IOs because they are not present on the emulated device. And you have the emulated firmware. So all in all, virtualization of devices helps a lot to get the idea, the big picture of the whole device and how it works. And that's really valuable. Even though sometimes you cannot emulate everything, but really often you get an idea how it works, how the processes are connected to each other, and sometimes if you start the emulation, you will immediately see some strange port listening on the network interface, and sometimes it connects back to some kind of telnet listener, and then you know, okay, there is a backdoor, and it happens really often. So I've mentioned it. Pro, you can do parallel tests, live debugging, and so on. But con, you have a lot of work, and you can put a lot of time into cloning the device. And it's not always possible for all OT devices, and it's also not really possible for 100%. But it's really nice if you are able to put a digital twin of your whole OT network, and if you do pen testing just on this digital twin instead of the whole OT environment. So if you are doing security testing, and if you are doing security testing on Linux-based machines, I guess you will know how to do a white box test. You will also know how to do gray box test, because sometimes you don't have the source code of all the applications. And I have brought some examples. So yeah, because of the time, I will not show everything, but that's not a problem. You can see here two pictures. On the right-hand side, it's the web interface of a running digital twin. And on the left-hand side, you can see all the open ports, you can see the listeners, you can see the processes, you can see also the CPU info of the running machine. And I can show you also a live emulation. So here is, I've used Medusa because it has a web interface, and yeah, it's really nice. You have two running firmwares, so from two different vendors, and ports are also set for the serial port, not for any SSH, telnet, or whatever listener. It's really for a serial port of the device, of the digital twin. And I connected to the, it's a bit slow because it's via the mobile phone. But I connected to the serial port of those devices. And for me, it's now possible to type those commands like ifconfig, like net stat, and yeah, just look which ports are open, which processes are running while using PS, for example. And I can also access to the web interface of those devices. So I'm connected via WireGuard, so that's a nice thing. Okay, I'm not that good in Chinese, to be honest. But that's, for example, a device from Delta Electronics. And if it loads in time, then you will be able to see the web interface of this OT device. And that's one part of a full digital twin from a full OT network. If you have multiple of those controllers, managed switches, routers, and so on, which are part of the industrial Internet of Things, which is part of the OT network, you can create a full, or not a 100%, but for example, 70% duplicate of your customer's network. And then you can pen test those devices instead of pen testing the real devices. And of course, you can do it with Medusa, you can do it with Thermodyne, you can do it with ARMX. All of them are based on some kind of QEMU, on some kind of build system, and all of them can be used to create such emulations, such virtualizations of embedded devices. And with those technique, you're able to really to create a snapshot of the network and pen test it. And you can also see it works for a broad range of devices, because a lot of devices are based on Linux, and that's the reason why it gets more and more easy to just use this technique. So I guess it's really slow. So it's via the mobile phone, via the hotspot, and yeah. But using this way, you can also do port scan. You can also use Nessus. You can use just any tool, and you don't have to lock all your network traffic. I mean, I would recommend to do it, but you don't have to do it for reasons like being sued from the customer and paying a lot of money because you are breaking processes. And yeah, that's really nice. So I had some other devices from Red Lion, from ProSoft, from Moxa. So that's a switch which also were emulated for 70%. And that device was around $10,000, I guess. And I just downloaded the firmware and did a pen test on the running firmware, found vulnerabilities, and just told them that they have vulnerabilities in their devices. And they also fixed those vulnerabilities in, I guess, 6 other device series, because they are using the same firmware base. And yeah, that's really nice if you catch a lot of them, because then you have helped to increase the security of a lot of OT networks. But the backside of this is the maintenance windows are just once a year. So they will install it maybe next year. Let's see. So a lot of devices were tested via this technique, so by me and by my colleagues, and currently pending are those 2 examples which I have shown to you right now. And sometimes you have the well-known reactions if you communicate those vulnerabilities to the vendors, which can be, no, it's not there, or just no reaction, or an endless ping-pong process which goes to nowhere. And sometimes, and that's the special case for digital twins, they say, no, it's your controlled environment. So the best thing is just to not say that you have tested those vulnerabilities on digital twins, because then the vendor will just say, no, that's not possible. So to sum it up, if you want to do complete OT security assessments, it's always challenging. It's really hard to not break anything. If you're using digital twins, You can build full clone, and you can use this technique to test IoT, IoT, or printers, or whatever you want to test. And you would not harm any OT networks because you're just testing a clone. You're testing a virtualization. And you can also find really easy new vulnerabilities and communicate to them to the vendor without having the device. And that's really nice. And yeah, there are also responsible or not responsible vendors. And you know that from communicating vulnerabilities to them, but that's nothing new. So thanks for listening my presentation. And if you have any questions, I'm around for the next day and for this day. And if you want to talk about digital twins, I'm highly interested. Just talk to me. And yeah, thank you.